Before getting on with UV mapping the cylinder, I just want to introduce another concept. If you look at this render, I hope you can see that the cube on the right looks a little bit more realistic than the cube on the left, and the reason for that is the cube on the left has got a very sharp corner and the cube on the right has been beveled so that it can pick up specular highlights. So adding the beveling adds another level of complication for us. So here's the same scene in wings, and you can just see it's a very small bevel on the cube, but that has implications when it comes to UV mapping, as I'll now demonstrate with the cylinder. So I'm going to create a cylinder, just the default cylinder. What I'm going to do, I'll select this top face and this bottom face, and then go to edge mode and just bevel it down very slightly. And if you hit the tab key, you can enter an amount. So if I do 0.02 for example, that gives us a very small bevel, but it should be enough just to be picked up by the render engine. Now another thing you get sort of as a booby prize when you create a cylinder is something called an n-gon, and this is this top face, and an n-gon apparently is a face with more than 4 edges, which this clearly has, and that can cause problems for some render engines depending. Octane is less tolerant of things generally, Bryce is more tolerant, and so you'd get away with that. So another consideration, as well as the bevel, will be sorting out that n-gon, but for the time being what I'll do is I'll just go select the entire shape, right click and get UV mapping it. So how am I going to split this one up? Well, I could select the top face and the bottom face and assign those to one of the UV charts, and then select one of these edges. So if I select the edge away from the z-axis there, so it'll be at the back, and then press L for loop, right click and mark that for cutting, and then right click continue by unfolding. So I've got this strip here, which is the beveled side edge, and these two top faces, which isn't too bad really. But the beveled edge is so close on the map that it's very difficult to see where it's come out. Now there are other ways of splitting this up. For example, you might find, let's lose the bottom face, so we'll make that a hole so we're dealing with less geometry, because it could be just stood on the ground, but we've still got that tiny beveled edge there. So supposing we selected the entire shape, right click and the UV mapping, force it to go again, and just segmented it by projection, letting the program deal with it rather than making the choices ourselves, then right click continue by projection normal, you could end up with the edge separated out because it had been assigned another selection map, but that would alleviate the problem having a very fine edge on there which looked a bit messy, and it was distorting the geometry, which often happens when you put the beveled edge on. You can sometimes get things twisting around. So you've got that to consider, as well as, I was going to say, this n-gon. So one solution to the n-gon is to use a feature in the face mode. At the bottom down here it says Tessellate, and you can use quadrillate, and you will have noticed that it's not disrupted the UV map, it's just added a few linking lines, and that's fine, but it may not be the way you want to split that face up. I'll just use Ctrl Z to go back a bit. If you try and collapse that face, so if we inset it and then collapse it like so, you can see that really does break the UV mapping there. So if we wanted that sort of arrangement, what you could do is get some of these existing points, and if you can get the right ones, connect them together, and then take this edge and cut it in two. See, just adding points, it's not disrupting the map, and then start connecting it up with these other ones, so that it's a bit laborious like many of the things in UV mapping, but you can see how this goes in a second. Don't forget everyone, and that one in the middle, I've missed one, typical. So there you go, that split that up, and for some reason it's not appeared in here yet, but it might do if we just force it to do it all again. So we'll just use the left click on that. So we're back here with this situation, but we've got this edge. So I really want to go back to my previous version where these were all together, but I want to keep this. So what I can do is use a feature where I can just UV map re-UV map a section. So I'll select that edge and then press G, and then go to face mode, and then I've got to try and get in close. I use the arrow keys to move the view around so I can see whether or not it's gone over the bevel. Press plus to take it over the bevel, and then right click, and then just right click again, and I can force the UV map on that, rotate around to the back edge, select one of these edges, press L for loop, and then it's gone right across. Yes. So because of the geometry that we can't see, when I press the loop on that, it's actually extended all the way around because it's cut across the joins that I made on the top face. So I'll select this edge again and use the loop command again, but hold the Alt key down and press L, and it'll just extend the loop by 1, so that'll have gone all across that edge but not right round the shape, and then mark that edge for cut, and then continue by unfolding. So you can see now I've managed to unfold it. It's looking a little bit wiggly across the top, which is what I didn't like before, but I'm going to straighten that out using the option where I press there, and then I can press L for loop, and then G, and then I can scale horizontal, tab 0, and then I'll do select and inverse and scale vertical. You can see now that's sorting that out, tab 0. So the horizontal will have sorted out the folded over edges at the very end, so all these little bevel lines are going to be straight if I'm getting to see them. It's quite fiddly. So if you want to zoom in on different parts of this image, you need to put your mouse pointer over something selectable. It doesn't have to be selected, and then press A and it'll zoom you in on that, so that just helps you navigate. And you can see these tiny little faces in there, that this is going to make things difficult for us, which was the intention, because you'll want to potentially want to produce models with little beveled edges. So what I'll do is select the entire shape now and left click on it so I can have all the UV stuff together. And the next consideration is I might want to chop that up so that the pattern's going to follow logically around from these faces. Well, I can just select these edges and cut them, and so now I should have lots of separate triangles. The next question is, can I join these triangles to this top face? Well, if I zoom back far enough, this looks like a single line, so if I select that and stitch it like so, you'll see that it didn't work. And the reason for that is that if you're on a face like this one, so on a face, it'll tend to select the edge that's adjacent to that face, and now what I want is the top edge, but it's very difficult to get to the top edge because it's not on a face. I could do it this way by selecting this one and stitching it, but I'm just pointing that problem out. And another problem has occurred here as well, because this edge here is not to scale with this edge. When I add the edge, it distorts the micro bevel. So I'll go back a step, Control Z, and what I need to do now is select everything all together and go scale and normalize sizes. Now hopefully when I select this edge and stitch it, it'll go in there without distorting the bevel edge UV mapping. So you can see, right, and it would be nice if I was to go on this edge here on this view and press L for loop. You can see that it should, if I could get it to go all the way around, thank you, select all the edges on these teeth. But if I now go stitch, it says you can't stitch too many charts at once, which is a shame. And indeed, even if I was to do it this way, right, so I select a few of these, it should allow me, and stitch, it's still saying too many charts. We'll try again, maybe this one. So we'll get some odd behaviours out of this. Right, okay, it looks like it's stitched 3 together because they've dropped into place, but you should be able to see in this mode that in actual fact they've only dropped into place, they haven't joined. So unfortunately, for whatever reason, and I don't know the answer to this, you can only stitch a limited number of things. It's stitched both those together, which is fine, even though I'd selected 2, but you can't guarantee it's going to work, so you have to be a bit careful. And sometimes you can see how that jumped round. It turned, so it couldn't stitch too many charts because it was trying to turn 2 things at once. So once something's stitched, you don't have to worry about deselecting it. That's stitched, so it's not going to worry about that. But you can see now I've got stitch round here. I'll see if I can do a few, but you'll see that probably is not going to work. You see one's been left out in the middle, which is more awkward than just doing one at a time. So I'll just finish doing this the laborious way. There is only the laborious way, it seems. There we go, and then we'll rotate it and sort it out. So to rotate this so it's back in line, I'll select this middle line here because I know I want that vertical, and then use rotate to chart Y. Then I can scale uniform. If I do the whole lot, I can scale to max uniform, so it's utilise the space. And in this view, if you look at the left view now, what I was aiming for is the flow of the pattern over these edges. So we haven't got a continuous pattern across the top. It's been compromised. We've done it this way so that we can have the pattern go around the corner, and you can see that it's got the edge UV mapped. You might wonder, and I'll just cover this briefly, why we can't just create the cylinder and then we'll select these edges. I'll set this to hard and do it this way. This is the other way of selecting the edges. So there we go, and then cut the one that's at the back here. So I'm just selecting that to hard like so, and then go into UV mapping. So that's left click, and then continue unfolding. Okay, you might wonder why, reasonably, we can't just select these faces here, switch to edge mode, and then bevel it slightly. But again, it's like happened when I started with the top. It creates weird distortions. So if I do that, all these faces get connected together and you get weird UV map. I've emphasized it here, obviously we're doing tiny bevel. If we did a tiny bevel, you might oops, and I've crashed wings. Okay, that's a good place to stop the video. We'll move on to, what should we do next? I don't know. Oh, that's really broken. A sphere, yeah, and cover similar points, but at least with a sphere we won't have to micro bevel the edges. That's a bonus.